Hello. What we're going to do now is talk a little bit about sound effects design. Now, if you're a composer for games, you will often find yourself roped into the realm of sound engineer, or you might consciously have chosen that path, in which case, well done. What I'm going to show here is just a little bit about how some of the sound design stuff you'll know from music will cross over into sound effects design. So let's take a look. Right. I'm going to play you some sound effects from our game Frozen Cortex. Now, Frozen Cortex is a game about giant robots playing a futuristic sport. So we wanted to create robot sounds and textures that were quite modern, but not too sort of obviously Transformers-y, like a little, touching on that a little bit, but a little bit more unique to us. And our robots have kind of short, sharp movements a lot of the time, so that was what I had in mind when I was designing these sounds. So let's take a listen to some of the finished sounds in this group. So these are just kind of movement layers that you'd have, and I'm going to show how those get kind of integrated into stuff a little bit later on. Right, so if we take a look at how these sounds are built up, what I've done here is I've built them out of these different little granular samples here. So you can see, like, I've used some kind of raw samples from sample packs and stuff that I've really mangled so that you can't necessarily tell anything about where they came from, and some stuff like this, just little tiny like granular things. It's a nice little warp sample, and this is kind of similar in some ways to how you would do like a drum and bass patch. You would kind of build it up out of these different resampled sections. Now that's kind of fairly straightforward, like, and you can do this with any samples. Like you can just select a Foley sample that you like and put that in here and blend it all together, mix them all together with volume, amplitude, envelope changes and stuff like that in this big mega group I've got up here. And then I do tend to put a little bit of limiter on them when I output them. But let's talk about making those constituent sounds, because that's sort of the hardest bit of this. So this is the thing that I tend to use for this. It's this device called Granulator 2, and it's a Max for Live device, I think by Robert Henke, one of the creators of Live, though I may not be correct about that. Basically, this is just a granular sampler, so you can drop any kind of waveform that you like in here, and then you can have all of these different parameters that you can play around with. You can automate them in Live, and it's basically really cool. So if I just, I can just play you, basically, if I turn some of this stuff off, I can just like play you the basic sample. So that's a very sort of standard little bass sample that I've got in here. But as soon as you start playing with the parameters, you can start to get some really interesting sounds out of it. So this basically defines how quickly it scans through the file. So if you kind of what I'm just doing now is just playing with some of these parameters to try and create something that I find interesting, that I like. There's also an FM modulation section in this. As you can see here, it's modulated with a sine wave, so you can really get super gnarly if you want to, like this. So something I'll do with that is either just kind of output that straight to a file, or basically kind of automate all the parameters and freeze the track. And once I've done that, you'll kind of come up with something that sounds a bit like this. So that's a load of different granular stuff just in a big long sequence, and then you can kind of nab bits out of that and just sequence them all up, as I said before. And that's kind of, a lot of that is what sound design is. It's about taking different stages. So you can take an attack stage, a mid stage, a tail, and then sticking them all together in a nice sequence. Once you've done that, you can then EQ and process them, crossfade them with other things. You'll often hear sound designers talk a lot about how they blended in the sound of a tiger with the sound of a washing machine or whatever. That's the stage at which you can get really creative and do that. One of the things I found with sound design is that it's quite difficult if you're just cherry picking samples from a site. There's all kinds of different sites. I use one called prosoundeffects.com. If you buy a lot, it gives you a palette to work with. So if you think about the kind of textures you want, for this game I bought a lot of metal textures, a lot of scraping textures, things like arc welders, machinery, even like printer sounds, fax machines, that kind of thing. You buy loads of that, and then you have this nice pool to work from, and you can just kind of take any sample that you want and drop it in. In fact, that's something I should show you inside this just very quickly. Basically, you can use any kind of sample in this. So I'm just like literally anything you want. Let's see if I can find something. I've got this library of found sound and various other things that I've got in here. So here's some samples of me hitting stuff. Here's me hitting my bin. So if we go in here now, I can just sort of find the start point of this and then start granularizing it. Yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff you can do with it. Just getting anything you want, throwing it in there, can be a great way of making sound. I will now show you what happens to the sound once you've made it, a little bit about how you integrate it with the game.
Download over 30 exclusive plugins. Get hundreds of pro-quality samples and power up your production skills with in-depth tutorials. We break it down for you step by step, and you'll see exactly how it's done in expert video guides and producer masterclass sessions with pro producers. Get all this and more with Computer Music Magazine every month on iPad and iPhone, PC and Mac, Android, and in print.